You got it, man. I've never seen an intruder something AM 1420 WBSM presents Spooky Southcoast with your hosts Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
Good evening and welcome to Spooky Southcoast. I don't know what's wrong with me. Why do I have so much trouble with the computer following the Red Sox broadcast?
I don't know. Just how it is.
Put that on the agenda for the meeting with Pete when he gets back from vacation. Find out why I have so much trouble coming out of the Red Sox. It's like, no matter what I press, it doesn't work. The Red Sox just want to infiltrate our show. It wasn't enough that they took away the first hour and 20 minutes. They want the last 42. Welcome to Spooky Southcoast, where we talk about the paranormal each and every Saturday night. You can listen to us live each week on WBSM as well as on WBSM.com. And you can also go to SpookySouthcoast.com and watch us on Spooky TV, where you can see what's going on in the studio. And hopefully you have better audio tonight on Spooky TV. Our friends are in the chat room there, and they can let us know if things sound better, because we decided that apparently my laptop was the problem. Matt Costa and I stayed here until the wee hours of the morning last week, and we troubleshooted. Troubleshot Tuesday. So, yeah, we think we got it going.
Yeah, it's quite all right.
So people can let us know what they think of the sound in the chat room. And, of course, you can call in anytime during the program, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. Check us out on Twitter as well, at SpookySC. And we're also on Facebook, and I think we still have MySpace. I reactivated MySpace. I reactivated it really a few weeks ago. I have no idea how to use MySpace anymore.
No.
It's just like a bunch of pictures, and like you can't access anything. You can't contact people through it. I don't understand how it works. Is Justin Timberlake automatically your friend? I think so. Yes.
Good.
Right. And even Tom hasn't reactivated his MySpace. But you know what's funny is Monique is I saw our friend Renee from Lizzie Borden's.
Yeah.
And I was like, the hell ever happened to her? And I tried reaching out to her through the email addresses that I found and everything, but no luck. But I'll keep you posted on that.
Right. She's a good kid.
Right. So, well, actually now she's got a pretty important job. So, yeah. So we will follow up on that, I'm sure. Well, tonight we are. If anyone was listening to the Tim Weisberg show this morning, or Saturday morning with Tim, whatever you want to call it. If anybody was up at 6 o'clock in the morning, like I was, we were talking about some of the greatest TV shows of all time, because I was putting Breaking Bad up there at the top of the list, and other people were defending The Sopranos, All in the Family, different programs. So Chris Balzano thought that since we knew we were going to have a shortened show due to the Red Sox, that we should probably have a show where we focus on some of the greatest paranormal-themed TV shows of all time. And we're talking about scripted shows, right, Chris? We're talking about shows that are scripted dramas or comedies or what have you. We're not talking about reality programs. And Chris, are you there?
Hello?
Hi.
Hey, it's when you dropped out.
Oh, that's... I didn't drop out. I just barely graduated. I'm just kidding. I was number 5 in my class. That's what taught me. So, we're talking about some of the greatest TV shows with a paranormal theme to them. We're talking about scripted shows, though, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because, I think everyone has their flavor of paranormal reality show. And I think, most people who are, of the older generation who have been doing this stuff for a long time are going to put those old school ones, which are pretty much reality shows, like they're documentary type shows. They're going to put those over the modern ones, but, I think that more relies on what kind of investigators you like. But we're just talking scripted shows here.
So if we're talking about scripted shows about the paranormal, where the storylines are already laid out, and we're talking about actors and contrived situations, and we're talking about ghost hunters, ghost adventures, paranormal state. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm like,
I'm just kidding. What? Wait. These people are going to get better audio now. They're saying it's staticky. What's the issue there?
I don't know.
All right,
Let's try this.
How about that? You know what? It's not us anymore. At this point, it's every person's computer in the chat room. At this point, everybody. Yes. It's not. All right.
Yeah, yeah. That's why we all have to break up.
So, Chris, getting back into this, so I read that list this morning on the morning show of the 101 greatest shows as picked by the Writers Guild of America. And I looked through the list here again before we came on the air, and I was trying to figure out what ones had a supernatural or paranormal tinge to them. And number 3, The Twilight Zone, I came up with. And let's look at some of these other ones here. Number 26, The X-Files. Number 27, Lost. I didn't go into sci-fi. I kind of just stuck with paranormal stuff. So the next one would be number 49, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I'm pretty sure, number 79, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. And that about does it. That's the end of the paranormal-themed shows that are on this list. And I'm sorry, I also skipped over Twin Peaks, which I think we should probably include at number 35.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet. However, obscure and confusing, definitely like the best elements of that were the supernatural ones.
So, in this, we're talking about a list that came out in June of 2013. So this is a pretty recent list. And there's a lot of shows that probably have a supernatural flavor to them that are missing from this list. Not surprisingly, because I think a lot of times when you cover these themes, those who judge great writing would tend to discredit some of these shows based on that subject matter.
Yeah, I think that's unfair because it seems to be those are the ones that kind of unify people. They bring them together. They get very big cult followings. It's easy to watch Modern Family. I'll just attack Modern Family for a moment. So watch something like Modern Family because it's the show that's on. It's on the phone at that time. It's very comfortable. You sit back and you watch it. Modern Family goes off and goes, "Oh, Modern Family, bring it back!" And then something else is going to come on, and it's going to kind of help on that. But a lot of these paranormal shows that don't necessarily get the in terms of the writing within them, in terms of the storylines, both the kind of internal each episode storylines, but also it might last a season or the entire series. They just don't get the credit with major people, but people who like them, people who watch them, are very, very passionate about it. So, that's why, rather than how many viewers someone has, how loyal someone is to a show, it's got to be taken into account.
Well, I did throw the question out on my Facebook page, and I asked people, for their own thoughts on it, and just, taking out some of the ones that were reality-themed shows like MTV Sphere and Ghost Adventure and things like that. Sticking with the scripted series, we have votes for The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, X-Files, quite a few votes for X-Files, Lost, Star Trek, Bewitched, Tales from the Crypt, Scooby-Doo, and Amazing Stories pretty much cover the scripted shows that people listed up there, except Don Bliss put My Mother the Car, which I guess would kind of count because it's a paranormal theme for your mother to possess a motor vehicle.
Right, and my favorite Martian. Come on, those might be older and like kind of hokey, but there you go.
I over Time Tunnel too. Sorry, I have to throw that back in there.
What about Elf?
Look, it's funny. I was looking at. So I wanted to see what are people saying are the greatest sci-fi shows.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, as I was looking at that, obviously debate genres and things like that. But we know, let's say like ghost or cryptid shows or eerie shows, such as even like the Twilight Zone, and one of the ones that people sometimes forget, like Ray Bradbury Theater, and the Hitchhiker, which always kind of rocked my world. But they were all much more space-based. They were the Battlestar Galactica, they were the Babylon 5s and things like that. And Alice kept making these appearances on these lists from the other shows that I thought might be better, didn't. And so it was funny because so many of those shows, so many of those lists didn't even list like the X-Files because they were very, very like, no, if it's not inside, in space with people who can't possibly exist, but it's not science fiction.
Well,
so unfortunately, there's no list for science fiction / horror.
Right, and I think we lump it in together because we're fans of both genres. But I'm sure that there's diehard sci-fi people that would want nothing to do with horror, and vice versa. But some of these anthology programs that we're talking about, Tales from the Dark Side, and shows like that, some of those even included all different aspects of the paranormal. It didn't have to be just space. It didn't have to be just ghosts or aliens or monsters or what have you. They incorporated all types of different storytelling, and you see a lot of that now in scripted straight series. You have shows like Roswell that was out a few years ago. You have shows like True Blood now, where they're trying to bring in a variety of different themes within one series.
Right. And even something like Fringe and Supernatural, which I've been watching. Trying to get into Supernatural, watching these episodes, but I often see how they're taking in all these other different aspects of the paranormal and kind of melting them through.
And who was safety dancing there? Was that you, Costa?
It was not.
I was gonna say you can dance if you want to.
You can leave your friends behind. Sure.
And if your friends don't dance, then
I just need like a door, and I can kick it.
Well, call for So what were we talking about before the show came on the air? One of the problems that I have though with the way that these stories are told now is it's almost like it's forced. Like I've pretty much given up on watching True Blood because a lot of these stories, and I never read the books, and I don't really care to, but it seems like they're kind of forcing as many different aspects of the paranormal into these stories as they can, and we see it on a lot of these shows. I mean, do you feel like now it's becoming so oversaturated as a storytelling device? Because, I mean, you were a big Buffy fan, and Buffy brought in a lot of different aspects of the paranormal, but it really never felt forced with that, though, right?
No, it is what it is. It's the best paranormal shows that are, there's one consistent kind of cast. So it's not like your Tales from the Dark Side or your Twilight Zone. There has to be a mythology, right? That's why Fox is so great. It's mythology that develops over time. That's why Buffy's so good. There's a consistency to different kind of characters, especially different paranormal characters that kind of come through. All of the modern shows is there's not that consistency. There's no mythology. I constantly am forced to watch Vampire Diaries, and it seems they just kind of whatever they want to do so they can solve the problem of that episode. All of a sudden, that's the mythology of the supernatural elements.
Right.
And so there's no kind of predictability. The predictability is whatever they want to solve. There's no kind of anticipation of like, oh wait a minute, imagine this kind of situation is happening. No, all of a sudden this person has a magical cube that does this. And it really aggravates me because I'm like, no, that's not happening. This is 5 episodes ago, this girl did this, and this. And my wife will just go with it. It's not supposed to be thought about. And I'm like, but it is. The best of these episodes, it is thought about. It is consistent. It is like, no, here's a universe that we have to kind of be consistent with and we have to be loyal to, as opposed to just kind of throwing anything out there to kind of make for a good story.
Continuity.
Exactly.
And that is one of the problems with having paranormal themes is that it becomes so easy to paint yourself into a corner and then pull out a cop-out ending to kind of have the MacGuffin to get you out of the story. And it's so overused that people don't really want to fully invest themselves into sci-fi and paranormal themes anymore.
Right, either that or they can't become as committed to it because there's whatever's going to happen. Whatever's going to I know they're just going to solve it. So I'm just so that the viewer has a lazy attitude towards the show because they know everything's going to be okay.
I mean, one show that's getting a lot of play right now is Under the Dome, and you and I are both big Stephen King fans. I was not a big fan of the way that book ended, but I know that they've said that they're changing the ending of the show or the source of the dome from what it was in the book, and they're trying to expand the universe of the story so that it can last multiple seasons. But you just watch it and you kind of have that feeling of, gee, I think I know what's coming. And even though they're saying it's different, I still think it's related. And it does kind of prevent your ability to fully invest yourself if you think you're going to be disappointed in the end.
Right, and sometimes, there's a delay in, and this is kind of what Under the Dome was for me, which is why I haven't been able to connect with it like I wanted to. There is a non-acceptance of a paranormal world that we live in. So, for example, as far as the paranormal experience, they say, well, it was just this and this, that. There's a whole bunch of them. They start to wonder if there's a ghost in their house. With so many of these shows, the characters who are in them seem to have this kind of like hands-off thing to the paranormal, unless it's they're like a vampire themselves or a werewolf. Mm-hmm. And so, because they're not embracing that, they're letting it kind of seep in too slowly, I can get engaged. I'm like, dude, no, it's a haunted robot. It's a haunted robot. Just deal with it. And these shows don't seem to want to do that a lot of times.
Yeah, I mean, we argue back and forth, usually via text, but we argue back and forth about some shows and about the writing and the storyline and direction of some shows. And I think that at least in the case of Under the Dome, it's actually better that Stephen King is hands-off, at least in this first season, because now he's going to jump in and tell the first story of next season. And he's going to play in the world that somebody else has kind of built around his own creation. So I'm interested in seeing where that goes, because that's a different approach. I mean, so often we see these Stephen King adaptations, and just using him as an example, but most of the paranormal stuff comes from source material elsewhere, and we already know how it's going to start and how it's going to end. And we don't see the ability for there to be development within that. It's almost like every character that's involved in a paranormal story is a stereotype or an archetype, and they're really there just to serve the purpose of the ultimate paranormal cause of the entire story. Which, and by the way, I just want to point out for those watching Spooky TV, I'm wearing the ghost hats that my wife makes now, and they're available for $20 for adults and $15 for children. Just go to my Facebook page; you can see all the different hats she makes. Sorry, I hate to plug over a question like that, but
it's all right. The commercials are playing. Nobody can see it anyway.
On that one they were. Everybody else has been smart and downloaded the ad blocker. So, but that's really what it is you don't really always get that character development. I think that's where Lost was one of the few series that focuses on these elements, where they really spent the time telling the story and the backstory of the actual characters.
And in addition to that, they let them have holes to fill it. So it was not necessarily we knew everything there was to know about all of these characters. We knew enough to kind of fill in the holes, or at least be intrigued by it to continue. You know, and it's always the people who go through the stories that make it more interesting. Like, even a ghost story, how many different kinds of ghost stories can you have? I mean, I know a lot of people like to continuously watch, like, the paranormal activity movies. I haven't really seen them. So it seems like the same kind of thing all over again. It's a matter of how many times you get to hear it. But I guess paranormal, and that's the environment and the characters who are going through it that make it interesting, and how they react to it, and how they develop them.
Now, when you're looking, though, at a show like Lost, you also have the other problem of when you delve into paranormal themes, and that's the fact that you can't always sustain that story. And as much as I love Lost, and you know how much I do, there were times when it faltered, and there were times when it seemed like they didn't have that master plan that they claimed to have, and where they got kind of painted into a bit of a corner in some of these storylines. And you have so many people that were disappointed in the later seasons.
Right. You know, I mean, please go back to our archives and listen to our discussion on the finale of Lost and the final episodes of it. I think when that show faltered the most was when it started focusing on the non-paranormal elements, so like power struggles and things like that. And that didn't make some people like, well, okay, but like, where are the polar bears? You know what I'm saying? Like, where's the fog monster? Mm-hmm. And so I would say that was probably like leaving your paranormal elements aside. That led to some of the worst episodes of that, and stretched to like 2 or 3 episodes where like, dude, I'm just watching because I need to know what happened.
Well, there's also a lot of other series that they start, they have the paranormal themes, and they don't get to tell the entire story. Lost was fortunate enough that they got to go through the entire series as they envisioned it, and they kind of pulled their own plug. But a lot of times we don't get that, and we're left hanging on a lot of series. One of which was one of my favorite shows of all time, Quantum Leap. The plug got pulled on that too soon, and the whole entire story didn't get told. And another one was, I don't know if you ever saw this, Chris, but Carnival on HBO had a lot of paranormal themes, so it was kind of like a Twin Peaks of the 1930s, and that got cut short. and another HBO show too, John's from Cincinnati, which came out for one season, and we weren't really sure where the story was going, but it definitely had a paranormal twist to it. And again, one and done. They didn't stick with it, which is surprising because usually with these cable shows, they will give them a couple of seasons. But that seems to be a problem that plagues a lot of these shows. Is they I don't know. They just, if they don't find the audience, they don't give them the time to develop and the time to tell the full story.
And of course, it's even more harsh on network television, where they don't have necessarily as much time to put people in. With something like Firefly. How possibly anyone in this world can cancel Firefly, right? I mean, it's like one of the greatest shows of all time. It's not one of the best sci-fi shows of all time. And yet, that made no sense.
Right, and it's because if it's not, Firefly 2 is like right on the edge of that old mentality of television as compared to the new mentality of television now, where TV doesn't have to exist just on the broadcast airwaves.
I'll give you a sci-fi one that they proved that was actually doing very well, Space Above and Beyond. They canceled that, and that had one of the highest ratings for a sci-fi show.
But you just qualified that by saying one of the highest ratings for a sci-fi show. The highest rating for a sci-fi show is still equivalent to, a daytime drama or a game show. True. Unfortunately. I mean, not that we want it to be that way, but that's the sad reality of it. I mean, one of the shows that I got into, and we actually tried to start a little campaign here to help save it, was Journeyman. That was another show that we forgot about that show. Yeah, it just popped back into my head. Yeah. But that was a show that had paranormal themes that never got the chance, and it had a lot of potential.
If I had to pull one out, and if I was making my list of top 10 paranormal shows, one of the ones that would be on the list which did not get the chance to live and to breathe.
The Ghost of Mrs. Muir?
No, that's been on for a long time, and I remember watching that when I was a kid. I actually recommended that in one of my posts on the Spooky Self-Proof article section.
The show is better than the movie.
What an amazing show the others was.
Yeah.
And I've gone back and I've watched some of those. I've done really bad YouTube videos of it, and it still holds up. It's like if this show had come out 5-6 years later than it did, I think it would have been a big hit.
And what was the show again? Just because we were kind of checking
the others. The others.
So,
do you remember it?
No, I don't remember it.
Oh no, the story of it was, and this was in Florida Part 1, so it must have been 99, 2000. Mm-hmm. And it was a girl who was going to a New England college, and she all of a sudden was able to speak with the dead. And she found this group of people who all had these different paranormal abilities. And it was really spot-on writing, like within the episode. It had a cast who all had different skills, so obviously, every episode was spent with a little bit of backstory, not in the flashback, but like a lost, but in terms of just kind of revealing who the characters were. It had this this kind of arc which they never really got to solve, which was almost kind of like if you've ever heard of the Bunnyman legend, out in Ohio, I believe it is. It kind of had this feel to it where there was a big bad paranormal force that the girl was eventually going to have to come into contact with. And they explored so many interesting things. They explored remote viewing. They explored things like being able to find symbols all around you. With an episode where they were flying on planes from the 401, Flight 401 case. All these really great paranormal elements. Most of these actors that were in the show went on to do 2 other shows and kind of get their own kind of amount of fame. And it was just the wrong show. It was the right show at the wrong time. It's one of those things I highly encourage anyone to go back and try to get. I think they actually do have it on DVD, but I'm not going to buy it. It's an amazing show. It's only like 10 or 12 episodes.
Yeah, every show should be online within the next 5 years anyway. So, well, that's part of the problem, though, is like I was saying before about Firefly, it was on the cusp of, when shows don't really get the time to develop. And look at internet, I guess we'll call it internet networks now. When you have a service, a streaming video service like Netflix, where now they're developing their own programming, you can see, and I mentioned this on the show this morning, this was just my idea, but instead of having all these failed pilots and one and done series where the first couple episodes don't draw, so they can the whole show, Why don't we put these shows out on Netflix or Hulu or these different services, out on the internet, out on YouTube, and let people vote for them, and let people rate them, and based on those ratings, decide whether or not you want to go forward with making more episodes. Why don't we put the success of a show directly in people's hands instead of Nielsen ratings, which have been outdated for the past 15, 20 years?
Right. And it's so much, even more than ratings, it's about the ability to segue into something else, or to be able to cross over, get products in there, or get a car company to agree to put their car commercials on a show about ghosts. Well, whereas if you put something out there, people go to it. Even if they go to it for 2 or 3 times, either the reality shows as well, they go to it at least 2 or 3 times to expose themselves to it. In other words, they're the first for this kind of stuff. Right. And the thing with that is that also the writers are drawn to that. So if you look at for example, the later seasons of the X-Files, so many paranormal, so many ghosts, so many horror writers started writing episodes for it just because they wanted to get in on it. Or they wanted to direct an episode just because they loved the idea of going for where they are, kind of doing a medium. And you can't necessarily, go and produce entire series. I want to go and do a few episodes. And so if they put something out there, people are going to watch to it. And believe it or not, I think that, like I said, people who are passionate about Firefly are still watching it. Every time there's a marathon, they're watching all 12, 14 episodes, however many it was. They're watching it, sitting down and doing it. They're watching the specials that are about it. And so that's the kind of passion and the kind of sticking to it that's going to make people buy the products that are advertised on it.
But the problem is that passion isn't rewarded in the current television format. I mean, we were lucky to have a show like Lost that we could get into, but how many shows have come out now that are supposed to have been the next Lost?
Right.
That just didn't gain that audience and just fell by the wayside rather quickly. They probably had just as much of a following, but they didn't have as much buzz, and I think that makes a big difference. I'm sorry to say, too, I think it helps that if you can get TV Guide and Entertainment Weekly to start promoting your show as being great, then that will help change a lot of people's minds, too, which it shouldn't, but it's kind of a situation.
I think and Fringe is a really good example of this, because Fringe, from what I understand, I wasn't into Fringe. It was on, much like Lost, I signed on late. It was actually over before I started getting into it. What you had is kind of an explosion of heroes, and then a lull as they're trying to find, okay, who's going to watch it, who's going to like it, things like that. And then in the later seasons, we just like, forget that. Here's the story we want to do. We're making this. We're making it so we made the 5th season for people who like it. Like, not for anyone else. We didn't expect anyone to come on. And so because of that, they kept playing with the format of the show, trying to make it something that they didn't really fully envision to be, because they wanted to draw people in. And so I think a lot of those shows were like Flash Forward and the new kind of incarnation of these. I think those fought just because the writing wasn't good. Like, they just weren't good shows. Because people, with the Flash Forward and with the premieres, like the first 2 weeks were killing the rating, and then throw it off because, it wasn't really that good.
And the NBC tried something similar with The Event. They tried something similar with...
what was Happy Town?
Happy Town?
Yeah.
I don't remember much about it. I know what you're talking about, but I don't remember.
Was that on ABC?
ABC, I think. Yeah.
What was that? It was kind of like a vampire werewolf show.
Yeah, that didn't last very long.
The Gates or something, was it called?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. There's just been so many of these failed attempts over the last few years of recapturing that type of magic, and like you said, if the writing isn't there, people aren't going to stick with it. But some of these shows, they've invested a lot of money in, they've invested a lot of time in, and they watch that go down the drain. I mean, you were talking about how Fringe, kind of struggled to find its way and kind of just started making shows for the fans. I remember with, for example, Quantum Leap again, like I said, one of my favorite shows of all time. They had a rule very early on, the writers did, that Sam Beckett was not going to leap into anyone famous. That they just weren't going to do that. And instead, when the 5th season comes around, and they're trying to make sure that they can get eyes on the show, and I don't know if anybody remembers when that show was on, but it suffered 1,000 deaths over the course of its life because they kept moving it from night to night, and they would have what they would call Leap Week, where they would put it on every night at 10 o'clock just to try to see what night it would have some success on, to try to keep it going, because the writing and the acting was so good, but nobody was watching it. And then finally, in the 5th season, they had to break that rule. And that's when you see him leaping into Dr. Ruth Westheimer, leaping into Elvis Presley, leaping into Marilyn Monroe's Bodyguard, and you start seeing a lot of these storylines come in to try to get eyes in the program. And it in some ways, it did a disservice to the original concept of the program. And the same thing happened with a show like Smallville, a little bit of a different situation where they're trying to stretch getting into that 10th season. But, you know, they always said, you know, no capes, no tights. They weren't going to have him actually become full-out Superman, so they did that whole thing where he becomes the Blur instead. And they don't actually full-out release him as Superman, but they still started moving him in that direction because eventually you have to serve that master if you want to continue to have the show be on the air.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it right on the head, which is actually the point that I was going to make before, which I lost because that's kind of the first man, is that the shows that are coming out now that are failing are trying to stretch before they have an audience.
Right.
So something like, and this is the pinnacle. Once you take Twilight Zone out of the way, so the Twilight Zone is Twilight Zone.
Right.
There's no better paranormal show than Twilight Zone. It's transcendent.
Outer Limits?
Yeah,
I don't think the Outer Limits is up there. I don't think that Outer Limits has the reach. I think
it doesn't have
the show, but it doesn't
It's a
have
contender, at least.
in terms of paranormal themes, yes. In terms of the Twilight Zone is different because it goes beyond paranormal themes and it's social commentary in a disguise.
Right. So for me, that top spot, if you take Twilight Zone out, is Buffy. It just is. I mean, it's probably my favorite show of all time, paranormal or not. The beauty of Buffy is that it had its story, and then all of a sudden it slipped in hints of other stuff that was going on. These other shows, and Flash Forward and Under the Dome is a really good example of this too, from the episodes that I've watched, is that they're trying to stretch it out so much and make it so mysterious that most of the time is spent with people just kind of going around like looking for red herrings and being confused all the time. So there's no story to engage you to get you and you're pumped up, and then all of a sudden there's this little hint at the end of like, you know, I don't get it. Just, everything makes sense because of this one thing. No, I have to go about it. Everything else was good. And then you're like, wait a minute, what's that other thing? And then it comes back. These other shows are stretching it out, making it so you have to watch like 12 episodes. And I know you love Falling Skies. I think Falling Skies that's the movie, right? Falling Skies, it's been 3 seasons of going nowhere. It's just been like every single time you watch it, it's like you don't, maybe you learn one thing over the course of the episode, and there's like 27 other things that you're like, it's weak. I think that really starts to drag on audiences. You want satisfaction, and then a hint of something more.
Well, what it is I find it, they have too many other of these little subplots going on, and they've written themselves into a corner, so to speak. So now they have to basically try and worm their way out, jump over various parts of it to try and get themselves out of the corner.
Right. And I think that's what a lot of them say, is that they're trying too early to kind of do that, like, we need to hook you for this big thing. But we're not going to do so much, we're going to keep trying to hook you. You don't have to. Like, I thought the X-Files was like that towards the middle of its run, and then it kind of went back to like, no, we're going to do a really amazing episode and then kind of teach a little bit, which is what makes that series so good as well.
Well, I was telling Moniz earlier, before we went on the air, and I've been mentioning the show to Costa, I just finished up tonight watching the first season of Orphan Black, which is an ABC American production, about clones, about a bunch of women who are all clones, and the storytelling on that is really good, but they gave you a lot of stuff at the beginning, and they didn't make you wait for the entire season to start piecing things together. Because, like you said, you know, nobody wants to sit around and wait all that time. Flash Forward drove me crazy about that, because, like, if they had started giving more clues and gave people an idea of what the show was about from the beginning, it would have had maybe a better audience. But instead, we keep getting these, the very last 30 seconds of the episode, they discover something, and then wait and find out next week, and then we go to next week's show, and instead, some bad guy's coming on the scene right when they're about to unveil what's going on, and it gets put off again. So by doing that, by overstretching it, then you kill the interest, because eventually people just say, you know what, I'm sick, I'm not going to wait anymore. And instead of just watching the show for what it is at that point, they get angry, they turn it off, and that's when the ratings start to slip.
Right. Every episode becomes around, this person then dies at the end. When does that person when he dies? Or, this person is a double agent. So they're actually a bad guy. They're actually, you thought they were this, but they're actually the vampire. That's why you've never seen them during the day. And it becomes really, for me, frustrating. I'm like, all right, I get that. I can totally live with it, but what are you going to do during the episode? So at its best, the supernatural and paranormal TV gives that, feeds that to you, and then kind of, once again, and it's video games 101, right? The big bad, the boss at the end of the season. Ted Buffy, I think, is great. Every season had a big bad. They had a fight at the end. And everything else, and all the other cool stuff that you do over the course of the video game, over the course of that level, it's lost, and at the end you fight the big person. Mm-hmm. It might be a little bit of a formula, right? I think Buffy did it really well, the way that they would do that, and the way they would tie things in and stuff like that. But some of these shows want to, give you not the game just continuously. Like, it's almost like just walking through water trying to get to the bad guy.
Well, I mean, we're just about out of time for this show, Chris, and I know that you said that, Twilight Zone is kind of untouchable number one. I have to agree with that. You picked Buffy as your number two. Moniz, what would you say is your number two behind Twilight Zone?
Outer Limits. Like I said, I like those type of stories.
Matt Costa, what about yourself?
Scooby-Doo.
But they didn't actually have paranormal stuff. Yeah, it was always a hoax. But they always figured it out and debunked it. They were the taps of their day. I guess I'd probably say that Lost is mine, because of that mythology and getting into the story. And for me, there was no better episodes than when you had Jacob and the Man in Black just sitting back and talking about how they were controlling all these pieces. That kind of showed you what that whole story was about. So many different shows people to go back and check out if they've never watched them before. And of course, Chris will have more shows to dissect and break down in the future, because it seems like these type of themed content is not going away anytime soon. Whether or not they get to last is a different story, but at least they're out there.
I think also with that, I think the further we get away from other shows, like Quantum Leap, the more we're going back into nostalgia brain. We're all waiting. It's not just for for the Quiche Factor. These are actually really good shows.
What about the old original, like Night Stalker, Kolchak? That's one you guys didn't bring up, and that was, the X-Files of its day.
But again, I mean, that had an even more limited audience, unfortunately.
I remember watching it as a kid.
Because you were its limited audience.
Yes.
It was you and Andy, and that was pretty much it. All right, that does it for this week's show. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris.
Oh, no problem at all. I wish you could come back and maybe do another thing like this.
Absolutely. But for now,
we'll Buffy-centric show.
I'll say for now, we'll let you get back to your Buffy marathon.
All right.
Have a great
Going
day.
back to Fringe, actually.
All right. Take it easy.
Have a wonderful night, guys.
Me too. That is Spooky South Coast content director Chris Balzano. You can check out his articles on SpookySouthCoast.com. He's always writing about different topics. We have a number of articles up there. Always new, fresh content from our stable of writers. Check out what's up there. We have Kira Emily's experiences at the Powerhouse. We have Bob Wright wrote a few columns up there as well in the last couple of weeks. Dave Francis. So check all that stuff out. Something from our friend Luann is up there right now. Read all of that. Also go to legendtrips.com and get your tickets now. We're getting close to sold out for the USS Salem, so you don't want to miss your chance to get those. Also, we have tickets for sale for Slater Mill and for the Fearing Tavern in Wareham, and a new one will be announced very, very soon. So get out there and get those tickets while you can. We'll be back next week with Andrea Perrin from The Conjuring, the woman who had all that happen to her. So until next week, stay spooktacular.
The station the South Coast turns to for local news, talk, weather, and sports. WBSM New Bedford, AM 1420, WBSM.